In the United States, black leaders who demanded freedom, power, and dignity were not just opposed. They were watched, infiltrated, discredited, and sometimes killed. This wasn't an accident. It was policy. Leaders like Malcolm X, Martin Luther King Jr., Huey P. Newton, and Fred Hampton were not dangerous because they were criminals. They were dangerous because they challenged the foundations of American power. Malcolm X tried to take the black freedom struggle to the United Nations, framing American racism as a human rights violation on the world stage. King, once celebrated for his message of nonviolence, began to call the United States the greatest purveyor of violence in the world, linking the fight for civil rights at home to the war in Vietnam. The Black Panther Party built free breakfast programs, community clinics, and armed patrols to protect their communities from police brutality. And in Chicago, the charismatic young leader Fred Hampton united poor black, Latino, and white organizers into a powerful rainbow coalition. Together, they showed that black people could build power and create change beyond the control of the state. They were building a future where their communities were self-sufficient, protected, and empowered. This wasn't just a protest, it was the construction of an alternative. The federal government saw this rising tide of black consciousness and unity not as progress, but as a threat. The FBI's COINTELPRO, a secret counterintelligence program, was created to expose, disrupt, misdirect, discredit, and otherwise neutralize black liberation movements and other political groups considered subversive. This wasn't a program to stop crime. It was a program to stop ideas. The methods were insidious. The FBI planted informants inside organizations, turning friends into spies. They forged letters and spread rumors to create paranoia and internal conflict, making allies suspicious of one another. They waged media smear campaigns, feeding stories to newspapers and television stations that painted activists as violent extremists and dangerous militants, twisting the narrative of self-defense into one of aggression. And when those tactics weren't enough, they resorted to outright violence, coordinating police raids on homes and offices, often resulting in arrest, injuries, and death. It was a systematic effort to dismantle these movements from the inside out and the outside in, ensuring that the message of black power would be silenced. No group was targeted more intensely than the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense. J. Edgar Hoover, the director of the FBI, famously called the Panthers the greatest threat to the internal security of the country. But why? Was it because of their guns? No. The Panthers were targeted because they built real, tangible power in black communities. They weren't just a political party. They were a parallel government, providing services the state had failed to deliver. They fed tens of thousands of children every single morning through their free breakfast for children program. They ran free health clinics, offering basic medical care where there was none. They provided legal aid and taught political education classes, empowering people with knowledge of their rights and history. Their newspaper reached hundreds of thousands of readers every week, spreading their message of liberation far and wide. The Panthers showed that black communities could protect and care for themselves, with or without the approval of the government. That was their true crime. Their self-sufficiency was a direct challenge to the system's authority, and for that, they had to be neutralized. At the heart of this new, unified movement was Fred Hampton. He was only 21 years old, but he was a revolutionary organizer with a vision that terrified the establishment. He was a master orator, able to connect with people from all walks of life. He united the Black Panthers with the Young Lords, a Latino organization, and the Young Patriots, a group of poor white Southerners, creating Chicago's Rainbow Coalition. He wasn't just talking about black power. He was building class solidarity across racial lines. He fed kids, educated communities, CHALLENGED police brutality, and built a movement that was growing stronger every day. He famously said, "You can jail a revolutionary, but you can't jail the revolution." The system decided to do one better. On December 4, 1969, at around 4:30 in the morning, Chicago police, using a detailed floor plan provided by an FBI informant, stormed his apartment. Over 90 shots were fired by the police. Fred Hampton and fellow Panther Mark Clark were killed. The official story called it a shootout, but the evidence later revealed something far more sinister. The Panthers have fired maybe one shot. The rest came from the police. It was an execution. So why were black leaders feared enough to be silenced or killed? They challenged the very ideology of white supremacy, not just with words, but with action. They exposed American hypocrisy to the world, contrasting the nation's rhetoric of freedom and democracy with the reality of racial oppression, poverty, and war. They built independent black power, creating institutions that served the people and operated outside of state control. And most dangerously of all, they united people across race and class, showing that the struggles of poor black, brown, and white people were interconnected. These leaders threatened not just bad laws, but the entire system of racial hierarchy and economic inequality that underpins American society. The state answered with surveillance, smears, raids, and assassinations. This was never about keeping order. It was about keeping power. The same playbook of fear, surveillance, and repression still echoes today in the way modern movements for racial justice are monitored and discredited. They tried to kill the leaders, but they couldn't kill the idea. The fight for liberation, dignity, and justice continues in the murals that honor these ancestors, in the protests that fill the streets, and in the community organizing that builds power from the ground up. Knowing this history isn't optional, it's self-defense. It's the blueprint for understanding the present and building a better future. Learn, question, organize. Thanks for watching.